On March 15, 2018, in Detroit, Michigan, 34-year-old Marcus Williams kissed his wife goodbye at their front door and headed to the airport for what he told her was a routine business trip to Miami. The morning sun filtered through the windows of their beautiful colonial home in Palmer Woods as Keisha watched her husband of 7 years load his black leather briefcase into his silver BMW. Marcus turned back one final time, flashing that charming smile that had first captured her heart at Spelman College's homecoming back in 2008. Marcus Williams was the embodiment of the American dream realized through sheer determination and hard work. Rising from Detroit's east side, he had built Williams and Sons Construction into one of the city's most respected contracting companies. His calloused hands told the story of a man who wasn't afraid to get dirty, while his sharp business mind had earned him contracts worth millions. Keisha, 31, worked as a family therapist, specializing in helping families navigate through their darkest moments. Together, they represented everything that was possible when love met ambition. Flying for business was something Marcus had done dozens of times over the past 5 years as his construction empire expanded beyond Michigan's borders. His briefcase was always packed with blueprints, contracts, and his lucky pen, a gift from Keisha on their first anniversary. These trips typically lasted 2 to 3 days, just long enough to secure new deals and inspect potential project sites. Marcus was methodical about his travel routine. Early morning flights, afternoon meetings, evening calls home to Keisha to share how his day went. According to Keisha, this Miami trip was completely normal. Marcus often traveled to explore potential contracts with hotel development companies and luxury resorts. He had mentioned this particular opportunity several times over the past month, explaining how it could be their biggest contract yet. As Marcus hugged her at the door that Thursday morning, he promised to call when he landed and reminded her about their dinner reservation at their favorite restaurant when he returned. It would be the last time Keisha Williams would see her husband alive. Marcus was supposed to return on Saturday, March 17th, for their 7 o'clock dinner reservation at the Whitney, the elegant mansion restaurant where they celebrated every anniversary. Keisha had already made plans for the weekend. She'd bought a new dress and even scheduled a hair appointment for Saturday afternoon. When Friday evening came and went without Marcus's usual check-in call, she felt the first flutter of concern. By Saturday morning, when her calls went straight to voicemail, that flutter had transformed into genuine worry. When Marcus didn't call or come home by Saturday evening, Keisha contacted Delta Airlines to check on his flight status. The customer service representative's voice grew somber as she placed Keisha on hold for what felt like an eternity. When she returned to the line, the words that followed would shatter Keisha's world forever. Flight 447 from Detroit to Miami had crashed into Lake Michigan shortly after takeoff on Thursday morning. There were no survivors among the 132 passengers and crew members aboard. The news hit Keisha's family like a devastating earthquake that rippled through their tight-knit community. Marcus's mother, Dorothy Williams, collapsed in her kitchen when Keisha called to deliver the heartbreaking news. Dorothy had raised Marcus as a single mother after his father abandoned them when Marcus was just 8 years old. She had watched her son build his empire from nothing, and now he was gone. Meanwhile, Jerome Patterson, Marcus's business partner who everyone called Rome, seemed strangely absent during those first crucial hours when the family needed support most. Within hours, their Palmer Woods home filled with grieving friends, family members, and neighbors who couldn't believe the tragic news. Keisha sat in stunned silence as casseroles appeared on her kitchen counter and sympathy cards piled up on her coffee table. Her sorority sisters from Spelman drove up from Atlanta, while Marcus's construction crew gathered in the backyard, sharing stories about their beloved boss. The man who had kissed her goodbye just 2 days earlier was now being discussed in past tense, his dreams and ambitions reduced to memories. Within 6 hours of Flight 447's disappearance from radar, the United States Coast Guard launched one of the largest search and rescue operations in Lake Michigan's history. Helicopters circled the crash site, while rescue boats battled 8-foot waves and freezing March temperatures. Captain Sarah Mitchell, who led the operation, later described the conditions as some of the most challenging she'd encountered in her 20-year career. The water temperature was a bone-chilling 38 degrees, making survival impossible for more than minutes even with life jackets. By dawn on March 16th, Coast Guard vessels had located a debris field scattered across nearly 2 square miles of Lake Michigan's frigid waters. Pieces of the aircraft's fuselage, seat cushions, and personal belongings floated among the whitecaps like tragic reminders of the lives lost. The debris field stretched from approximately 12 miles northeast of Milwaukee to 15 miles southeast of the Wisconsin shoreline. Recovery teams worked around the clock, pulling fragments of metal, fabric, and plastic from the unforgiving waters, while families waited desperately for any news of their loved ones. The passenger manifest confirmed what Keisha already knew in her heart. Marcus Williams had been aboard Flight 447 when it plunged into Lake Michigan's icy depths. His name appeared as passenger number 87, seated in row 22, Seat A. Delta Airlines verified that Marcus had checked in at Detroit Metropolitan Airport at 6:45 that morning and had passed through security with his black leather briefcase and small carry-on bag. The airline's records showed he had purchased his ticket 3 weeks earlier, paying with the company credit card he always used for business travel. Despite the Coast Guard's exhaustive efforts, no bodies were recovered from the crash site due to Lake Michigan's treacherous deep waters and brutal winter conditions. The lake's depth in the crash zone reached over 500 feet, while powerful underwater currents had likely carried victims far from the debris field. Marine Recovery Specialist Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez explained that the combination of freezing temperatures, strong currents, and the lake's immense depth made body recovery nearly impossible. Families would have to find closure without the comfort of laying their loved ones to rest. 3 weeks after the crash, insurance investigator Rebecca Chen arrived at the Coast Guard station in Milwaukee to examine the recovered debris for Midwest Mutual Insurance Company. Chen had spent 15 years investigating aviation accidents and had developed an eye for details that others might miss. As she walked through the warehouse where debris was cataloged and stored, something immediately struck her as unusual about the pattern of wreckage spread across the metal tables. The debris pattern didn't match typical plane crashes that Chen had investigated throughout her career. In most aviation disasters, personal items are scattered randomly and show signs of violent impact with water or ground. However, several passenger belongings appeared to be in remarkably good condition, almost as if they had been carefully placed in the water rather than torn from a disintegrating aircraft. Chen documented these inconsistencies with growing suspicion about the crash's authenticity. Some passenger belongings seemed deliberately staged to Chen's trained eye. A leather wallet was found with all identification cards perfectly intact and readable, despite supposedly being submerged in turbulent lake water for weeks. Several pieces of luggage showed minimal water damage, and their contents were arranged too neatly for items that should have been violently scattered during a catastrophic crash. Chen began photographing these anomalies for her detailed report. Based on Chen's findings, Midwest Mutual Insurance flagged Flight 447 for potential fraud investigation rather than processing the standard accident claims. The company had paid out over $40 million in life insurance policies from the crash, making it one of their largest single-incident payouts in company history. Chen's report triggered a joint investigation between the insurance company, Federal Bureau of Investigation, and National Transportation Safety Board to determine if the crash was genuine or an elaborate deception. Before we continue with this incredible story, I need you to do something for me. If you're enjoying this mind-blowing tale of deception and mystery, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next will absolutely blow your mind. We're just getting started, and trust me, you don't want to miss a single detail of how this investigation unfolds. And let me know in the comments. What would you do if your spouse's plane crashed, but something felt off about the whole situation? Would you trust your instincts and dig deeper? Or would you accept the official story and try to move on with your life? I'm genuinely curious about your thoughts because Keisha Williams was about to face exactly this dilemma, and her decision would change everything. The insurance investigation was just the beginning of a mystery that would take 5 years to solve. 6 months after Flight 447 disappeared into Lake Michigan's depths, Midwest Mutual Insurance made the decision to pay out Marcus Williams' life insurance policy, despite the ongoing fraud investigation. The $1.5 million payout arrived in Keisha's bank account on September 21, 2018, bringing both financial relief and a crushing sense of finality. The insurance company explained that while irregularities existed, they couldn't definitively prove fraud, and Michigan state law required them to honor valid policies after 6 months when no body was recovered from an accidental death. By the fall of 2018, media attention surrounding Flight 447 had completely disappeared from local news broadcasts and newspaper headlines. The initial round-the-clock coverage that had dominated Detroit's airwaves for weeks gradually gave way to other stories, other tragedies, other mysteries that captured the public's fleeting attention. Television reporters, who had once camped outside Keisha's Palmer Woods home, moved on to cover political scandals and celebrity gossip. The 132 victims of the crash became statistics in aviation safety reports rather than the beloved family members they had once been to those left behind. In January of 2019, nearly 10 months after losing Marcus, Keisha made the difficult decision to return to her job as a family therapist at Detroit Community Mental Health Center. Her colleagues welcomed her back with gentle understanding, knowing that helping other families navigate trauma might provide her own path toward healing. Keisha threw herself into her work with renewed intensity, specializing in cases involving sudden loss and family crisis. Her personal experience with grief gave her insights that textbooks couldn't teach, though some days the weight of others' pain combined with her own felt almost unbearable. On March 15, 2019, exactly 1 year after Marcus Williams boarded his final flight, Wayne County Probate Court officially declared him legally dead. Judge Patricia Morrison signed the death certificate in a brief, somber ceremony attended only by Keisha and Marcus's mother Dorothy. The legal declaration felt like closing a book that Keisha wasn't ready to finish reading, but Michigan law required the formality for estate purposes. With Marcus officially dead in the eyes of the law, Keisha could finally begin the process of settling his business affairs and moving forward with the rest of her life. While sorting through Marcus's business documents for the estate settlement, Keisha discovered the shocking truth about Williams and Sons Construction that her husband had hidden from her for years. The company that appeared so successful was actually drowning in debt, with unpaid invoices totaling over $800,000 and outstanding loans that Marcus had personally guaranteed. Bank statements revealed a pattern of desperate financial juggling, with money being moved between accounts to cover immediate expenses while larger debts continued to grow. The American dream that Marcus had built was actually a house of cards ready to collapse. Jerome Patterson, Marcus's business partner, who everyone called Rome, vanished from Detroit just 3 weeks after the plane crash, without a word to anyone. His luxury apartment in downtown Detroit sat empty with rent unpaid, and his phone number was disconnected by early April 2018. Williams and Sons Construction officially dissolved in May when creditors discovered that Rome had been the one managing the company's finances and investment decisions. Keisha found it strange that Marcus's closest business associate would abandon everything so quickly, especially when she needed answers about the company's financial problems and outstanding contracts. Starting in June of 2018, anonymous money orders began appearing at the offices of Marcus's creditors, systematically paying down his outstanding debts. The payments arrived monthly, always in amounts of exactly $2,500, with no return address or identifying information. By the end of 2019, over $60,000 had been paid toward Marcus's debts through these mysterious money orders. When Keisha contacted the creditors to ask about the payments, they could only tell her that the money orders were purchased with cash from various post offices across the Midwest. 3 years after Marcus's death, Keisha cautiously began dating again when her friend introduced her to David Thompson, a kind-hearted teacher from Birmingham. David was patient with her grief and understanding about her need to take things slowly. But even as their relationship developed, something always felt wrong to Keisha about Marcus's death. Late at night, she would lie awake thinking about the anonymous payments, Rome's sudden disappearance, and the insurance investigators' concerns about the crash. Despite David's genuine affection and her family's encouragement to move forward, Keisha couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus's story wasn't finished. In February of 2023, nearly 5 years after Marcus's disappearance, Keisha made a decision that would change everything. She contacted Diana Foster, a former Detroit police detective who had built a reputation as one of Michigan's most thorough private investigators, specializing in cold cases and insurance fraud. Keisha explained to Foster that she needed closure, that something about Marcus's death had never felt right, and that the anonymous debt payments had continued arriving like clockwork for years. Foster listened carefully to Keisha's concerns and agreed to take the case, warning her that the truth might be more painful than the mystery she was living with. Foster's investigation began with a routine background check on Flight 447, but what she discovered shocked even her experienced instincts. Through her contacts in federal law enforcement, Foster learned about a sophisticated corruption network that specialized in staging deaths for desperate clients willing to pay enormous fees for new identities. The network had been operating for over a decade, using corrupt officials in aviation, maritime, and government agencies to create elaborate deceptions. Foster realized that Marcus's case fit the exact pattern of previous fake death schemes that had been investigated by federal authorities, though most had never been fully prosecuted due to lack of evidence. Foster's routine check of international money transfer records revealed a disturbing pattern that connected directly to Marcus's case. Using her law enforcement database access, she traced the anonymous money orders that had been paying Marcus's debts and discovered they originated from wire transfers sent from Central America. The transfers followed a precise schedule, arriving every month on the 15th, the same date Marcus had supposedly died in the plane crash. Foster noticed that the amounts varied slightly, but always totaled exactly what was needed to keep Marcus's creditors satisfied without paying off the debts completely, as if someone was deliberately maintaining the payments to avoid suspicion. In March of 2023, an unrelated Drug Enforcement Administration investigation into money laundering operations in Mexico accidentally exposed Carlos Mendez's fake death network. DEA agents raiding a suspected drug money operation in Tijuana discovered files containing detailed records of clients who had purchased new identities, including flight manifests, falsified death certificates, and payment records. Among the seized documents was a file labeled Williams, Marcus, Detroit, containing photographs, financial records, and correspondence about his fake death arrangement. The DEA immediately contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who realized they had stumbled upon evidence of one of the most sophisticated insurance fraud schemes in recent history. Armed with information from the DEA investigation, Foster traced the money orders back to their source in Belize City, Belize. Working with international banking contacts, she discovered that the wire transfers originated from Belize Bank's downtown branch, where they were converted to United States money orders and mailed to Marcus's creditors. The bank records showed that the transfers came from an account belonging to someone named Miguel Santos, a construction worker who had opened the account in April of 2018, just 1 month after Marcus Williams supposedly died in Lake Michigan. Foster's pulse quickened as she realized she might have found Marcus's new identity. Foster contacted her sources at Belize Bank and requested security footage from the monthly visits when Miguel Santos made his wire transfers. The bank security manager, intrigued by the international investigation, provided Foster with digital recordings spanning nearly 5 years of transactions. On her laptop screen in her Detroit office, Foster watched grainy but clear footage of a man who appeared every month on the 15th, always wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses, always conducting the same transaction. Despite the disguise Foster's trained eye immediately noticed the man's distinctive height, build, and the way he carried himself, details that seemed remarkably familiar. Foster submitted the clearest security footage images to a facial recognition software program used by law enforcement agencies across the country. The technology analyzed bone structure, facial proportions, and distinctive features that couldn't be hidden by sunglasses or baseball caps. Within hours, the system returned a match with 97% certainty. Miguel Santos was Marcus Williams. Foster stared at her computer screen in disbelief, looking at side-by-side photographs that proved beyond any doubt that Keisha's husband had been alive and living in Belize for the past 5 years. The man who had been declared legally dead was very much alive and systematically paying his old debts. On April 10, 2023, Foster requested an urgent meeting with Keisha at her office, bringing a manila folder filled with evidence that would shatter everything Keisha thought she knew about her husband's death. Foster gently explained her findings, showing Keisha the bank records, security footage, and facial recognition results that proved Marcus Williams was alive and living under the name Miguel Santos in Belize. Keisha sat in stunned silence as Foster revealed that her husband had orchestrated his own fake death to escape his financial problems, leaving her to grieve a man who was very much alive and had been watching her rebuild her life from afar. After Foster presented the overwhelming evidence that Marcus was alive, Keisha made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. Instead of immediately calling the police or federal authorities, she asked Foster to help her locate Marcus in Belize so she could confront him herself. Keisha explained that she needed to look into his eyes and hear from his own mouth why he had chosen to destroy their life together rather than trust her with his problems. Foster initially resisted, warning Keisha about the legal and safety implications, but ultimately agreed to help when she saw the determination in Keisha's eyes and understood her need for personal closure. On October 12, 2023, exactly 5 years and 7 months after his supposed death, Marcus Williams stood on the front porch of his Palmer Woods home, his hands shaking as he inserted the key that somehow still fit the lock. Foster had contacted him in Belize through intermediaries, telling him that his wife knew the truth and wanted to meet face to face. The guilt that had consumed Marcus for over 5 years finally drove him to return to Detroit, knowing he would likely face federal charges, but unable to live with the deception any longer. The man who knocked on that door was weathered by years of tropical sun and emotional torment. When the front door opened, Keisha looked at the man she had mourned for over 5 years and spoke the words that would haunt Marcus forever. "I've been expecting you, Marcus." Her voice was calm, controlled, but her eyes held a mixture of pain, anger, and something that looked almost like relief. Marcus stood frozen on the threshold, unable to speak as he took in the sight of his wife, older now, stronger somehow, but still the woman he had fallen in love with at Spelman College 15 years earlier. The silence stretched between them like an ocean of unspoken words and broken promises. Inside their living room, surrounded by furniture and photographs that belonged to a life he had abandoned, Marcus finally confessed everything to Keisha. Through tears, he explained about Rome Patterson's Ponzi scheme, the $2.3 million in debt, and the dangerous creditors who had threatened his life. He described the crushing weight of his pride that prevented him from asking for help, and his twisted logic that faking his death would solve their problems while protecting her from the shame of his failures. Marcus admitted that he had watched her social media from Belize, seeing her grief and her attempts to rebuild her life with David Thompson. As Marcus spoke, Keisha listened with the professional composure she had developed as a therapist, but inside she was processing 5 years of grief, anger, and betrayal. She told Marcus how his supposed death had nearly destroyed her, how she had blamed herself for not seeing the signs of his distress, and how she had spent countless nights wondering if she could have saved him. The conversation lasted for hours, with Marcus begging for forgiveness and Keisha demanding answers to questions that had haunted her for years. By the end of the night, both of them were emotionally exhausted but finally facing the truth together. Can you imagine the emotions in that room? A woman confronting the husband she buried 5 years earlier, learning that her grief was based on an elaborate lie designed to protect her from financial ruin. The mixture of relief, anger, betrayal, and love that Keisha must have felt is almost impossible to comprehend. I want to know what you think about this incredible confrontation. Let me know in the comments below how you would have reacted if you were in Keisha's position. Would you have called the police immediately? Or would you have needed that face-to-face conversation to find closure? Your thoughts on this emotional moment really matter to me. Within 48 hours of Marcus's return to Detroit, federal agents arrested him on charges of insurance fraud, falsifying his own death, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. The United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Michigan filed a comprehensive indictment that detailed Marcus's elaborate scheme, including his collaboration with Carlos Mendez's fake death network and the systematic deception of insurance companies, government agencies, and his own family. The charges carried a potential sentence of up to 20 years in federal prison, with prosecutors arguing that Marcus's case represented one of the most sophisticated insurance fraud schemes they had ever encountered. Throughout the legal proceedings that followed, Keisha demonstrated incredible strength that amazed everyone who witnessed her journey. She testified at Marcus's sentencing hearing, not to defend his actions, but to provide context about the man she had married and the financial pressures that had driven him to such desperate measures. Keisha spoke about forgiveness, not because Marcus deserved it, but because carrying anger would only continue to poison her own life. Her grace under pressure inspired other families dealing with similar betrayals, and she began speaking at support groups for people whose loved ones had committed financial crimes. During the trial, it became clear that Marcus's refusal to ask for help had destroyed everything he claimed to be protecting. His pride had cost him his marriage, his freedom, his reputation, and 5 years of his life that he could never recover. The debt that had seemed insurmountable in 2018 could have been managed through bankruptcy, business restructuring, or simply honest communication with Keisha about their financial situation. Instead, his decision to handle the crisis alone had turned a manageable financial problem into federal crimes that would follow him for the rest of his life. Pride, the prosecution argued, had been Marcus's most expensive mistake. In February of 2024, Marcus Williams was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. Judge Michael Harrison noted that while Marcus's financial desperation was understandable, his elaborate deception had caused immeasurable harm to his family and wasted significant government resources in the fake crash investigation. Marcus is currently serving his sentence at Federal Correctional Institution Milan in Michigan, where he works in the prison's construction program and has become a mentor to other inmates struggling with financial crimes. His earliest possible release date is scheduled for February 2031, when he will be 47 years old. Keisha has become an advocate for honest communication in marriage, speaking at relationship seminars and writing articles about the importance of financial transparency between spouses. She emphasizes that Marcus's biggest mistake wasn't the business failures or even the debt. It was his decision to handle the crisis alone instead of trusting their partnership. Keisha often tells audiences that marriages can survive financial ruin, business failures, and even bankruptcy, but they cannot survive deception and betrayal. Her message resonates with couples facing their own financial struggles, reminding them that problems shared are problems that can be solved together rather than destroying families through secrecy. What did you think of this incredible story of deception, betrayal, and ultimately, the power of truth? This case shows us that sometimes the people we trust most are capable of unimaginable deception, but it also demonstrates the incredible strength of the human spirit when faced with devastating betrayal. If you enjoyed this shocking true crime story, make sure to subscribe to Explosive True Crime Stories for more cases that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about the people in your life. Let me know in the comments, what's the most unbelievable story you've ever heard? Have you ever discovered that someone close to you was living a completely different life than what they showed you? Before we end, here are some warning signs of financial desperation that everyone should watch for. Secretive behavior about money, sudden changes in spending habits, reluctance to discuss financial matters, and isolation from family and friends. Remember, honest communication is the foundation of any strong relationship. If someone you love is struggling financially, encourage them to seek help rather than handling the crisis alone. Sometimes the pride that we think protects us actually destroys everything we're trying to save.